Good morning, everyone, and I'm so grateful that you came down here today. So some of you may know Susan Kelly vonMedicus, as she has long been intertwined with St. Thomas. For those of you who don't, however, I would bet that at the very least you have seen her works. The extraordinary icons in the Hutchinson Room, the painting on the wall in the vesting room, and the icons in Cheston Chapel are all her own creations. An incredible artist who specializes in sacred art, Susan has works in galleries and in private collections all over the world, though she teaches close to home here at Villanova. She's won awards there for her excellence in teaching, so I'm definitely looking forward to what we have today. Fun fact, she is the niece of Grace, Princess of Monaco, or better known as Grace Kelly. Today we are incredibly blessed as she will guide us into the world of illuminated manuscripts, and I believe we will even have some hands-on fun led by Susan. So without further ado, Susan Kelly vonMedicus.
Very much for having me here. I am going to try and do a running sprint through the subject since most of my lectures are 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I'm used to being able to go off on all sorts of tangents and flights of fancy. So I'll try to restrain myself. So thank you for having me here at St. Thomas. As said, I've lived in very close proximity to the church for many years and have been lucky to do some work for the church, to do some of the wall painting in the hall over there in the vesting room, as well as icons. My primary training is in iconography. Studied with a Russian master for about 40 years now, and still do. Still consider myself a student of his. But I'll make any kind of art. I like to sit with my hands. I will make baskets and prints, and I've taught at Villanova for about 15 years. I teach printmaking, and depends on the semester. Iconography, I've taught calligraphy and text-based art. That's something Villanova has the oldest in the country, I believe, program that offers a university degree inside of maximum security prison. In our case in Pennsylvania, it's out at Graterford, the old Graterford, it's now called Phoenix. And I teach the art section of that, so once a week I'm out at the prison, not every semester, but and that's a whole another story that maybe another time we can get into. They do fantastic artwork. So today's subject is filigree ornament from the late Gothic period. So the Gothic period is about 12th to 15th century in art and architecture, and towards the end just as we're getting ready to go into the Renaissance, there was a particular style of ornamentation to handmade books. So illuminated manuscripts were the very fancy books that were made starting in the early centuries when they were on scrolls, and then they, in the Coptic, Egyptian, and Ethiopic tradition, started folding those scrolls into a concertina. That was the first transition step to what we call the codex, or the book, which opens and has a spine on it. So bookmaking became, in the very earliest centuries, the primary way of passing on and teaching mostly, we're talking now the Christian world, through gospel books, psalters, etc. And there were monasteries in general, were the places where the people were, number one, literate. That was demand of most monastic rule, was you had to, whether you wanted to or not, learn how to read and write. And also the book production. So we're going to talk a little bit about book production, but as we get to this period that I'm going to talk about today, and hope to get to a project for you guys, is right at the end of handmade books. Handmaking a book is an enormous undertaking, requiring many specialists. They were among the most precious objects in a medieval life. If you had them at your monastery, if you happened to be, as literacy rates grew, you happen to be a wealthy person, it was like showing off that you had a book. First of all, it indicated you were literate, and number two, it was made of very precious materials, took a long time, it was a very expensive thing to have. It would be like showing off your Ferrari today, I guess, when people came over, if they saw you had this fancy book. So books are really precious and take a huge amount of time and energy to produce. As we get to mid-1400s, Gutenberg comes up with the movable type printing press. And this is the transition, and at this point, book production becomes in high demand. They can produce a lot more of them. They stop using certain materials that were too hard to produce. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And so this type of decoration is fitting right at the end of that period. I think most people are familiar with Gothic style script, which is the very pointy, the architecture, the windows and columns and roof lines of a Gothic cathedral. Well, the writing style, that was an aesthetic that was very preferred at the time, was also that pointy top and very dense, it's sometimes called black letter. So normally, if I'm going to teach this style of calligraphy, we're going to go into learning the writing style too, but that's a little more time intensive. So I've already written down in Gothic script your project, and you're just going to do the decoration. So let's get going on some pictures, and then we'll get to our project. So here is a picture of a monk, Monk Eveline, in the scriptorium around 1105. Now notice he's holding two things. He's got his quill pen. Pens at the time were made of feathers, usually a goose or here in the States we use turkey, because we still do write with these implements, well, some of us do. It was usually a goose or a swan over in Europe. The other is a knife. And the knife is your pen knife, that's where we get the word, where you would carve the end of your sharpen or make your tool. It was also your eraser, because you could scrape off the ink with that knife. These documents were written on animal skin vellum, which is very sturdy. It holds up to corrections a lot better than the paper that we now use, the cellulose paper. And here we have Donald Jackson. I think most of you might be familiar with the St. John's Bible Project. It was started in the year 2000. It took 11 years to make, the first completely handwritten Bible commission since Mr. Gutenberg invented the printing press. And he used only the traditional materials, he said, because he did modern illustrations. There's everything from the DNA of the AIDS virus to images from the Hubble telescope in his illuminations, his imagery, but he used traditional materials and techniques. He used a feather quill pen, he used animal skin vellum pages, because he said these books have lasted for almost 2,000 years. So we want this to last. This impressive, it's now being bound into actually 7 volumes, doesn't fit in one volume, quite large. And I hope some of you, as these illustrations travel around the country and the world for a few years, got a chance to see some of it. It's a remarkable accomplishment. So what are the materials needed? We have up at the upper left the aforementioned quill pens with a penknife. We have oak gall was what was used in Europe. I've made many times black walnuts right about that time of year when those little green boppers start falling. Black walnut makes a beautiful ink that is used pretty commonly for natural ink here in this country. And you can see them making the oak gall ink. Oak galls are growth on oak trees. To make the traditional ink, we have minerals here. Can you see when no, it doesn't look like the cursor goes up there. We have mineral pigments. You couldn't go to, Dick Blick and buy your art supplies. You had to pick it up off the ground or know somebody who traded across the mountains into Afghanistan to bring you back a piece of lapis lazuli to make that incredible blue that was used. So these are all semi-precious stones and minerals and earths that were the right color that you could use to illuminate these things, which is why when something is very rare, it's very precious, it's an indicator, again, of great sort of wealth and reverence as well. So, and they love that bright blue, ultramarine blue. At the bottom here, we have, bottom right, we have some monks sitting in a scriptorium, because this is where most of these documents were made. Here we have preparing the animal skin vellum. And this is still done in this same way with, this is called a lunellum, this knife he's holding, it's like a moon, so it's called a lunellum. The ones I've used were actually a guy took a circular saw blade and ground off all the teeth and sharpened it to make this special shaped knife. And here we have a calf skin with some sheets cut. So and here I brought some if you want to pass around and see. This is the material that was used. Hemmed in here by my cords. I want to pass these around. This is the material that was used for the production of these books. And as I said, they are still digging these books up in bogs in Ireland where they've been buried for 1,500 years, and you can still get them apart and read them. So it's a very permanent material, very sturdy material. As I said, around the time when they started getting greater need, this was extremely time-consuming to manufacture, and I know because I've been to a place in Montgomery, New York that still makes it up in near West Point, up on the Hudson. It's actually, I think, near Nice. It's a place that still makes it, greeted with stacks of deer skin and goat skin and things that animal skins, and you have to scrape them, and you know why it costs $100 a sheet when you actually go to make it. So that was just not going to be possible in a high demand for books, which is when we started switching to linen and rag paper. Around, I think, Fabriano, which is a currently still manufacturing Italian paper maker, started around, I think, in the 1200s. And the rag man was a guy in the neighborhood who went through the streets asking for rags. So after you wore the shirt, your little sister wore the shirt, it was used as a rag or a bandage. When it was really finally done, you give it to the rag man, and these would be soaked and then put through a screen to make what we call paper today. And it's still basically the same process. It's just been, of course, far more mechanized and big production, but it's still a cellulose fiber. It's basically scientifically the same thing. So this book is at the Glencairn Museum, and I hope if nobody's been there, you ought to take a time to go. They're a fascinating museum, Bucks County, north of sort of Huntington Valley area in Bernathen, and they have a fantastic collection of medieval stuff. And they built the cathedral there, Bernathen Cathedral, as well as the museum, which was the family house for the Pitcairns, out in the medieval method. And they have, he collected sacred art from all different traditions, Native American, Assyrian, Greco-Roman, Egyptian, and of course Christian, but their collection is quite remarkable of sacred art from all cultures around the world that they honor. In any case, one of the items they have there is this 2-foot hymnal. It's huge. Of course, in those days, a hymnal was in the front of the church, and the whole choir would read from the same book. There's no way to get 50 or 100 books the way we fill the pews with them. It was way too precious an item to have to make multiples. So it would be huge, and it would be written on a very large scale so everybody could see it. And they have one of these here made in the mid-1500s in Spain, and it uses the style of decoration I'm going to be showing today. So it's well worth the trip. It is on animal skin vellum. You can see places where it's sewn and stitched, where you can see on the lower right there where it was turned enough times, hands and oils would stain it, where it would need repair. So let's look at some of these decorations. What makes this style distinctive? So these are typical initials. They would take the first letter of a sentence or a paragraph or a hymn or whatever, or an important initial, say the deity name in the center of a piece, and decorate it and make it large. And in general, a calligrapher would go through and do all the writing. And then leave spaces for important big letters, and a illuminator or a painter, an artist, would come later and insert those in. And the style that was very popular then is this sort of boxing of the letter and then filling all of the cubby holes created with pattern, different kinds of patterns, foliate patterns, geometric patterns, all different kinds of knotwork, all different kinds of patterns. And the tradition was, and of course when it comes time for you to do yours, you can choose any color you want, but almost 100% that you will see in the older books are either blue initial with red filigree decoration, or the opposite, a red letter or versal, it's called sometimes, and the blue fine filigree decoration. Here we have more. So you can see there's flowers, there's more flowers in these corners, and then there's sort of some little braided knotwork here and stripes around the edge of the cube. And look at this wonderful off the corner little sprout. Corners give you opportunities for sprouts and little sort of knotted string that comes off. I'm a big knitter, so I'm looking at that like an Irish knit sweater. And then we have here in the center, you do occasionally see gold or green. Here we have a green background. This is a close-up of floral pattern. And so here we have some stripes. Again, those little sprouts off the corners, like a fern type shape thing filling this, and again, a boxing. One of the things to there's different ways of participating in art. There's the purely aesthetic, where you go, you see an art, and you just enjoy the beauty and the challenges and the story and whatever it's saying to you. And there's like the art historian who takes the academic approach and analyzes what time and what its place is in its culture and its time period and the whole progression of movements of art and what's significant. And then there's the artist who participates in it. So you have to look at things in a more analytical way when you're going to participate in it, to sort of, visual discernment is one of the keys. That and practice, I will tell my students 100 times, it's just like basketball, believe me, Villanova understands basketball, or any musical instrument. You're not good at it the first time you try, you have to practice, and I guarantee you, if you practice, you get better. There's no secret sauce. Like, it's magical that somebody knows how to do this. It's somebody who was willing to spend the time to practice and look really carefully. So, looking at carefully, I think you can notice almost every, I'm going to call it a moat, every initial is colored in solid, and then it has like what I call, as I said, a moat, like a little slice of white paper that goes around. And one of the reasons one does this is if the pattern and the colors sit up right next to each other, they tend to visually blend. So it creates so that you can see the crisp edge of both sides of the ink by having that little sliver. And it can be tiny, like a 32nd of an inch, but you want that little moat all around your letter so the letter stands out against this sort of serving platter of pattern. Whoops, did I miss one there? No. We can see here these, like, again, little loops, and I think you can see pretty clearly the moat around the outside of that G and the inside, so all edges get. And then they're often divided, like this one is in a cruciform division, and then design some little floral or bubbles or whatever you would like. Here we have another example of the blue with the red or the red with the blue. And once again, you'll see there's this moat that goes around each one and then divided into, depending on the size of your donut hole, you can see these donut holes or little corner spaces that are made when you put the box around this. Then you design whatever is going to go inside of that. And sometimes by dividing it up, sometimes going horizontally through the whole letter like this C. Notice also these decorated initials often are enclosed. Normally a C you wouldn't think would be closed on that right-hand side, but they're doing this to allow for creating, I'm going to call them bento boxes. It's like little containers for pattern and decoration. So anyway, here's a whole bunch of them. Sometimes they sprout and do funny things off the side. This one's very elaborate over there with sprouts of foliate work coming off. everywhere, and it's sort of a lace-like, I guess you might say. Here's just a whole bunch of, almost all of these are from that Glencairn missal. It's an interesting book because it comes after they've started printing books on the printing press, which was in the late 1400s. This is maybe 50, 100 years later. And it's also written, it's a Latin hymnal. It's written in plain chant. So this is obviously a monastery, because at the time the Vatican was preferring the old plain chant of polyphony. To go to a musical historian, I'll leave all that to them, but this one is interesting in that it's kind of a throwback retro book at this time period, using plain chant rather than more contemporary, and also using this very old style decoration and handmade everywhere. So I think that's enough pictures. We'll keep going through, but here you can see over on the left this is typical Gothic style script, very pointy, very dense. The hymnal, the Spanish hymnal, is actually, you can see some of the letters here, it's called Rotunda, which is taking off of the Gothic, very thick letters with hairlines, are some of the characteristics, but it's becoming rounder, and it's actually a little easier to read. So the changing of typeface is something that you see also over time if you look at these old manuscripts. Here you can see, here's a whole alphabet from like a guidebook for a calligrapher to pick out some designs with these wonderful like little snowflakes that go along the side. And filling with, here's a garden at the bottom of the one page. This script right here is actually getting into a more Italian or Italic style script. Here we're back to the pointy, notice pointy tops, pointy bottoms of the typical Gothic. So here's a medieval pattern book. This is from the 13th century, where again a calligrapher could look up different ideas for patterns and styles of letters. And here you'll see that they are all closed, like the D and the C and the E, so that they can be decorated. Here is a Gutenberg Bible. What they did was they loved the look of an illuminated manuscript, handmade. So what they printed was the black letter, the black text, and it was in a Gothic style, movable type. And they left spaces, just the way they did when they were making a handmade manuscript, for an illuminator would come later. So each one, I think there's a few dozen left in the world of the original Gutenberg Bibles, and the decoration in each one is different. So you look at it and you think, well, wait a minute, how did that happen when it's a printed book? But it was the text was printed, but the decorations were done by the monastery, or the person who bought a copy of that book would hire somebody to do the style of decorating. Yes, sir?
For the background imagery, are there any rules that would have been understood by contemporaries that said, oh, that's a floral pattern, that means this, or that's a botanical, or that's geometric, or any rules behind the background imagery other than what the artist thought?
Well, there's certainly a sort of it's a symbolic language. But there was a great deal of humor. If you look at manuscripts, especially in the marginalia, the monks seem to be given great license for doing creepy, weird stuff, bawdy stuff. There's a lot in there that maybe if the bishop looked closely, maybe wouldn't approve of. But yeah, no, there are certain animals, certain flowers. There was a whole symbolic language, and you would maybe choose to do the Tudor rose for Mary, or there were certain flowers associated with different characters, a lily for Joseph, etc. So yes, you might choose, or you might just choose to be naughty. And there seemed to be a great deal of license for that. Yes, sir?
In those areas that appeared to look like musical notes?
That was a hymnal, yes. So it was musical notes.
Is that was directing the way the chant should go?
Yes. That was for the, and often they would do just the first verse with the musical notes, and then they would assume you have learned the tune now, and they just have the additional verses, sort of like we have at the bottom of the hymnal, the additional verses are listed down below, and they don't have the music with them associated with each verse. But yes, that particular book I was showing most of those images from is a hymnal and was used for plain chant. So here's some contemporary examples, then we're going to get going on your project. This is one I did for a friend who had a grandson for a baptism as a present. You can see by the texture of the paper that this is on animal skin vellum, and it's done, and I do most of my work with a liquid ink and metal nib pen. I have markers here which are fine, but you can get an even finer line using a metal nib fine. Some of them are called croquill pens, or croquis pens, sometimes we shorten it in the art world, and those were in the old days literally made from a crow's feather. They like wing feathers, by the way, to make quills, pens, and crow's feather, of course, is much smaller than a goose feather, and you get that very fine line from it. So you can see here is a C, and it has the moat around it, the little white space, and then stripes, and then flowers, and then bubbles, and it's whatever you want to make up. That's why this is a really fun project for anybody to go into. You decide what you want to put. Here's a close-up of the C itself, with just one sprout down in the bottom right corner of a flourish. Here's one that's a little more complicated. This one is Pax a Bonum, the motto of St. Francis of Assisi, done with a lot of fancy filigree work. And that one isn't red. It's sort of purple and green and red, so not the traditional colors. I made this on a piece also of animal skin vellum, and you can see there's a big honking hole there. But I left it. That's just one of the things that you get sometimes with a stretched piece of vellum. Here's not, and by the way, I have a couple of these here up on the stage so you can see the in real time. This one is I did for an Easter card one year, and it does have a little bit of gold leaf touched in there. But you can see ropes and bubbles and little, all different kinds of decorations sprouting off the A for Alleluia. You can, if you know any Latin, you can see lapis, the stone. It's about the stone being rolled away on Easter in a plain chant. And there's a close-up of the letter itself. The initial letters are the fun. Here's one I did as a demonstration for a workshop I gave at Bryn Mawr College in their art history department, wanted a hands-on project. And so this is their school motto, I delight in the truth. So the kids and they did some wild stuff, some of it very goth and some, so you don't have to do it super traditional. You can take it off into your own. Art is a free expression world. You do not have to confine yourself rigidly to traditional forms, and those kids certainly didn't. But here's, again, different ropes, and it looks like, a twisted ribbon and floral. But notice the moat around the letter itself, all the spaces, and then dividing it into smaller grid, and then doing the decoration. Here's one I have up front. This is the Prayer of St. Francis, decorated with birds and filigree. Here's one, you can tell I'm a St. Francis fan, the Canticle to Brother Sun and Sister Moon, also with the music there. Notice the O has a center panel with some decorations, and then surrounded on the outside, and some sprouts. So, and here's another contemporary example of an alphabet. And then I wanted to just show this last slide is, I don't know how many of you are familiar or have participated in, I find a great resonance with the technique-wise in doing Zentangle. Anybody ever done Zentangle? It's a practice of meditation through artwork where you do a simple sort of free form and then fill the little boxes with different textures and geometric or again, a lot of foliate or natural life type, like these cherries here, and again, bubbles and spirals and little boxes, and you'll see all of these different patterns. But this one you'll see showing up this bottom left on the one that says Contemporary Zentangle. Basket weave, all of that. You'll see that. Here it is, right there. Right? So this practice is very similar to what we're doing, and a lot of people, as I said, use it as a meditative practice to be just in the moment, focus on these little small areas, fill them with some beautiful design, and combine them together. So I'm going to plug in my so that you. I would not expect you to finish these today here, but you can at least get started and take them home.
Are these all done freehand, or do they have some kind of tools like a compass or whatever?
Well, you could use a compass if you wanted a perfect circle, but rulers certainly are helpful. Oops. Don't want me, and I want there.
Are brushes ever used, Susan? Do they ever use brushes?
Yes, I use brushes, and but usually for the very fine lines, I would use a pen with a metal nib.
But the bigger, flatter
The bigger
areas,
areas, you can certainly
because
use a brush.
they look very even.
But you could use, brush skills are like, you see somebody who can chop up an onion like in minutes, 2 seconds, and so they, brush skills are like you have to practice and know your tools so that it does exactly what you want. When you place it. And again, no shortcuts, practice. So what I set up for you is a quote from St. Thomas, of course.
Oh, good. You've got more arms peg. Thank you. Yeah, it's a, wow.
And here's one that I worked on. Let's see if I can eliminate this.
Did I,
So many wires here.
did I took a class of, making art with best flowers? Yeah, it was a chess. And I think there's a proper time to grow up so that her that in the flower show. That's fascinating.
Okay. So what I did was I wrote in Gothic calligraphy,
Some of my own too.
I, ord, and my odd, and drew in the shapes for big initials for you to decorate. Okay? And the symbol of St. Thomas up here, and the attribution there of where it's from. So Thomas's statement after he sees the wounds of Christ. And then I also have this I call a sampler or glossary, and this is by no means exhaustive, but it's a whole bunch of ones that I use all the time. And it shows you different types of decorative stuff you might choose from, or just make up your own. So when you go to and here's like a little dog in the corner there if you look closely, and there's ferns, and there's flowers and knots. I see somebody knitting, I'd like to do knot work, etc. And here's one I started, and then I thought I'd show you. I have up here A lot of markers, I would choose maybe a fatter marker to do your main color, and then one of the skinnier ones to do, and I use markers for all of this, so it's possible. And again, carefully, and I did it with pencil first, and there's pencils and rulers up there also. Draw this like moat, so give myself, so that that red has a nice crisp edge to it. So I did a little moat around everything, so leave that paper. And then started filling in and doing designs. In this case, divided this into 4 flowers that march up that shape. Here's one where I did not do a moat, it's a smaller initial, and you can see how the G doesn't stand out as well, right? But it's in the middle of the text and I think it's fine. And here I have one that I've started. I did a little pencil line down the center so that I would do the same sort of thing as this one. I don't know if it's pretty pale on here. I don't know if you can see the pencil line, but there is. So I'm going to divide this here, and I'll maybe do these same little circles inside with little dots in the center, and then a second little band with the loops on it, or I may decide to do something entirely different. And then the decision will be, do I want to sprout off one of these corners and maybe bracket this symbol of St. Francis, St. Thomas? It's up to you what you would like to do with it, okay?